Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, we take a look at the year that was. Also, we examine some of the players in the Mike Hubbard indictment. Also this year, we celebrate our Walk of Shame. The Prince of Perps, you got it, the old speaker. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics with your host, Bill Brett, and the V Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V Team. Welcome all.
Good morning and great 2015.
Yes,
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
We're keen on 15.
Keen on 15.
That's
We got a lot.
pretty
We got a lot that's on stack that's riding this year.
Absolutely.
Well, you know,
The docket's full for January.
I hope we don't see exactly a repeat of 14. 14, I'm glad to see in the rearview mirror. But we did see in 14 the Speaker of the House, Mike Hubbard, the most powerful man arguably in Alabama, be indicted of 23 counts of felony public corruption. But he was not the only one. And the starter, the first one out of the gate, was Representative Greg Wren. Baron, catch us up on the Walk of Shame, as I like to call it.
Well, Greg Wren really kicked the whole Walk of Shame off this
Right,
year.
he did.
He pled guilty to a misdemeanor. It wasn't a felony. But he resigned his office, I think April 1st, maybe?
Yeah, it was April Fool's Day.
Resigned his office, pled guilty to a misdemeanor, and as part of his plea agreement, agreed to continue cooperating in this investigation. I think the Speaker of the House was either named or heavily intimated in the plea agreement as the one he would be testifying against. And it led to really months and months of speculation and sort of the 2 weeks that went on over the course of last year, where everybody kept saying, oh, the indictments will come in 2 weeks and 2 weeks and 2 weeks. And it went on and on and on. And finally, Mike Hubbard was indicted in October. But it really Greg Wren sort of is a forgotten piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, because he worked together to put the 23 words into the state budget, into the
Medicaid legislation. Right?
Yeah, Medicaid legislation. Susan, you know, we were the first ones to report that story.
We
How did
were.
we get that story?
It was literally a call in the middle of the night that says, you need to go look at PBMs.
Which are pharmacy benefit management companies.
Right. Well, after looking very hard and very long, we finally found it.
You mean you weren't given an inside tip?
No,
There
you
were
know,
no leaks for the
I'm just
grand
joking.
jury.
you know, basically I looked at Bill and said, what's a PBM?
But you
Sounds
know, that is
delicious.
one of those weird things. That somebody called and says,
Yeah.
in the middle of the night, says you should look at PBMs. I went, what's a PBM? And they said, just look it up.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was the whole conversation.
Well, you know, Greg leading off with that really, I mean, people have known him, respected him in the legislative process for years. So for him to do this, I think that kind of shadowed the Goat Hill. And everybody started really thinking, this is for real, if Greg Wren is stepping down.
Well, he was popular. He was knowledgeable, very professional, but
And a leader in many different organizations throughout the country.
Yeah. I know Sunday school teacher, but you know, I beat up on him quite a bit. Hopefully, he will be helpful and can move forward. I think the other one that really stands out is federal judge Mark Fuller, because he's going to survive this scandal of having attacked his wife.
I don't know.
You think he might?
Whether, you know, I'm
Not-
the wrong person to ask, I think, but, you know, this domestic violence issue is very serious. It's very near and dear to me. And when, like I think we've discussed throughout the year, when you have both U.S. senators, your congressional delegation, all that, he's now divorced this wife, now dating the one that he's accused of, out and about publicly, the whole 9 yards. And then, I don't mean to step forward, and then you have another state senator, Republican, that does the same thing. I mean, to me, this is egregious. And to me, this is something that we should not be tolerated.
It's not exactly the family values that people like Senator Tom Whatley Wren on Is It Susan?
It's certainly not. And a lot of people don't understand that it's just not poverty-stricken people that had experienced domestic violence. It's also people in the wealthiest neighborhoods. And it's worse in the wealthiest neighborhoods because they're so afraid to call. It's so hard to get a woman to call in because she's so afraid of retaliation, whether it's another physical beating or whether her...
Or if she doesn't have any way. You know, it doesn't cross races or society levels. That's what I would
Exactly.
say.
And
Okay?
I will say that 5% of domestic violence is against men. But now, watching these two men, you know, save their political careers
powerful
and all of that,
positions.
in powerful positions, that's going to make her, whoever it is, more hesitant to call.
And
the
what
next time.
message does it send to the woman trapped in this situation
Mm-hmm.
if a federal judge and a state senator can be accused of this, beat the rap, keep the reputation intact, stay in office, keep all the political connections, keep getting wined and dined, and act like it never happened?
And you think about it, from a court's position, a federal judge, you know, you've got sexual abuse cases, you've got all these things that come before them, he's going to have to recuse himself. And in the legislative process, you know, we've always got domestic violence issues and different things going on.
Every session.
I just don't know, I mean, this is the bottom line. If you've ever been around it, you've ever been a victim to it, if they do it once, they do it again, they do it again. Sadly enough, it is a sick disease and they need help.
It progressively gets worse.
Right.
The first thing is the violence. The second thing is she recants on the story. The third thing is, honey, I'll never do it again.
That's right.
And then we go right back through the cycle.
It's a very vicious
And this
cycle.
is sending a bad message to anybody who's ready to end that cycle.
Well, I want to move on now to someone who has not been indicted. That's Henry T. Sonny Reagan, former Deputy Attorney General. He has lost his job, and he supposedly has leaked information that helped Mike Hubbard and the Barry Moore case. I mean, this is serious business, isn't it,
This
Susan?
is very serious business. We're talking obstruction of justice, leaks coming out of the AG office, 2 major cases that have been impeded by, God only knows what he's told these other attorneys. And, you know, we're all basically sitting now and waiting and wondering, why haven't they indicted him yet? He's lost his job. That's been made clear. Now why hasn't he been indicted?
He's moved back to Enterprise, but Claire, have we ever seen anything quite this bizarre?
No, we haven't. Of course, that's his hometown, and you know, it's very troubling to me, being someone who loves the Office of Attorney General and worked there under some fine men. It just would have never been allowed. I do think that Attorney General Strange did put out this memo, which he did the right thing, and you know, I know that the Van Davis and Hart have had to go and defend themselves simply because Mark White, who is a media hound circus and trying to play out Mike Hubbard's case in the press and taint the jury pool. This thing with Reagan, Sonny Reagan, is really just unreal, and I don't see how he doesn't become disbarred in the state of Alabama.
I mean, you're an attorney. How
As
does
an,
he survive
as an
this?
attorney, it's one of the most scandalous things that can happen is to turn against
What
your
would
client.
happen to you if you did something like that?
I would be disbarred before I had a hearing. I can almost assure you. And I'm hoping that people in political office or these AG appointees don't get special treatment, just like I don't want the senator or a federal judge to get special treatment in a domestic violence case. But it's one of the most sacred bonds you can have as an attorney with your client is this duty of loyalty. And when you take your client, if you're the deputy AG, your client is the state of Alabama. You, me, all of us, everybody watching at home, that's your client. And to turn against your client and to leak information out that's damaging to your client, it breaks the bonds of civil society.
We're going to have to hold it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more analysis and commentary. Thanks for watching.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
I teach. I touch the future. I am AEA.
I keep the school clean every day for your children. I am AEA.
Congratulations on your scholarship. I help children make choices for college and careers. I am AEA.
We are AEA.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka. The perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Welcome back to the V, the voice of Alabama politics. We had some bruising big events, and it wasn't just you, Jack.
We're glad to have you this morning.
You are a big bruising event all by
Yeah,
yourself.
right.
Jack knows more people than anybody I've ever known.
You ever gone to lunch
Really?
with him?
No, yes, of course.
Well, if Jack and I don't know them, they're probably not worth knowing.
Well, I've heard that.
Is that what
I've
it
heard
is,
that.
Claire?
I've heard that.
Okay.
Well, big bruising events this year. Right before the 2014 elections, a coup was set in motion at the Alabama Education Association to oust Executive Secretary Henry Mabry. He survived, but it cost him something, didn't it, Jack?
Well, I think some of the old line AEA hardcore Democrats were upset with Dr. Mabry because of his involvement in some Republican elections. But, while he lost some and spent a lot of money, he also knocked off some people that probably nobody suspected could be knocked off. So I think his membership overall should like the fact that, to me, he's more middle of the road than Dr. Hubbard. And, I just think he appeals to, that philosophy more than Dr. Hubbard did. I think it's a good change.
Well, there's people on both sides of that. There's still some of the liberals that want after him. But we understand that the African-American, the black members of the AEA are very solid behind Henry Mabry. That's at least what I hear.
Well, there's this rosy memory of Dr. Paul Hubbard that stops in about 2007. And people forget the slaughter of 2010 that AEA took. They won one race that they were involved in 2010. That was Joe Hubbard. Every other single race that they were involved in on the Democratic side, they lost. And so when Henry Mabry came in, it seemed like he wanted to say, okay, we're going to diversify our membership, try to engage in races that more reflect our membership base. We're not 100% Democratic membership. Why should we be a 100% Democratic lobbyist group and only be concerned with Democratic races? They get involved in some of the Republican races and won 6 or 7 of them, but didn't win 25 or 30. But again, go back to 2010, they didn't win any.
But they got a lot of bad publicity on this
Yeah,
thing,
but you
Claire.
got back up, and you were kind of going there. In 2010, the Democrats still controlled the House and the Senate. Then Mike Hubbard and them have come in, and Del Marsh, and they now control it. And since they've had the control since 2010, there's been just this dogmatic, beaten up AEA every day for the last 4 years. So there's this really bad kindred spirit there. So of course, I think Dr. Mabry and them, as you mentioned, did the right thing. The state of Alabama is Republican now. You've got to play in the Republican
Dr.
primaries.
Hubbard told me before he left that he had financed someone to run against Mike Hubbard in, I think it was 2006. And they spent a lot of money and made Mike Hubbard spend a lot of money, and Mike never forgave him.
Right.
That I think, which is one of his biggest problems.
Well, we know that he's a very vindictive person. And
Right.
if anybody does anything against the speaker, he
and
will
don't
never
forget,
forgive you
Dr.
for the rest of your
Hubbard
life.
was executive or was vice chair of the Democrat
Right,
Party for a
right.
long time.
But-
Mabry's not involved in the
He's
inner
never been in
workings
that.
of either
but,
party.
But as you look back, when Mike Hubbard was chairman of the Republican Party, he used to take money from AEA.
Yeah, well, everybody took money from AEA.
Yeah.
But
That was
I
the-
guess what I'm just saying, the whole election process has changed since 2010. Everybody's Republican for the most part, and so the dynamics have
Well,
changed.
And that's
And
why I
it's-
think they wanted to play in,
Yeah.
in these primaries,
Well, sure.
because they knew the future of the
They had
state as
to.
Republicans.
We haven't reported this yet because I didn't see any particular need to, but if you go back and look at the donations of his personal money, if you look back, and it's public record, Henry Mabry, Dr. Mabry, has donated more money to Republican candidates than Mike Hubbard or Dale Marsh individually have.
Well, I can assure you some of that because I've called him for a lot of money for a lot of over the years. Presidential, Senate,
He's
congressional, and
definitely,
everything.
contributed to sessions and
I think in the end they're going to be glad they had him, Dr. Mabry. I think the membership's going to.
It's hard for anybody. Like Dr. Hubbard was there for so many years, 45, 50, just like Bear Bryant at Alabama. You've had somebody for so long, they're used to that, they're used to their leadership, and change is always difficult for people.
And he used to be a punisher. He never cut Republicans a break over the years until his later years at AEA. So
yeah, it's people don't like change, and when there is change, they want to point the fingers if things don't go the way it is.
But
the guy
change
at
is
the top
healthy
is
and
always
good.
going to be the one that you shoot at. I think
agree.
the guy at the top always gets shot at. One of the biggest disappointments, and I hate to laugh about it, was this pep rally that was held just days after Mike Hubbard was indicted on 23 felony counts of public corruption, you went down there and checked out the cheer squad, didn't
Well,
you?
I didn't know it was going to be a cheer squad. I thought it was going to be a press conference, and I wanted to hear the questions asked. I didn't want to rely on the media filter. I wanted to hear the tough questions that were being asked from the media. And I walked in and I saw all these 15 or 16 Republican representatives. Del Marsh was there. And I turned to a friend who was in the audience and I said, this is the lowest moment of my life as a Republican. I've never been more ashamed to be a Republican than I am right now. Seeing Republicans who campaign on law and order, cleaning up the culture of corruption, standing up there supporting a guy who was just fingered by the Attorney General, a Republican, as a crook.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I was just astonished. I walked away shaking my head, shaken from the event. It took me several days to sort of make sense of it.
Well, the sad thing is Mike is so powerful and he controls these gentlemen and women. And we saw at the first beginning of the quadrennium in 2010, where there were some Republicans that didn't do what he wanted on a certain bill, so he kicked them off rules, kicked them off education. They're fearful of him, which is scary. They're fearful.
He bought them in 2010.
Yeah, he bought them.
When he was party chair and Del Marsh raised all that money for campaign 2010, Mike gave cash dollars and provided services for a cadre of candidates that he went out and recruited and trained, and they owe him. And that's what that was all about, was payback. But it's scurrilous.
The thing that really disappointed me,
How do you really feel?
I think scurrilous sums it up.
I hope I could spell it.
Yeah, never say any word that you can't spell. The thing that really disappointed me was seeing Mike Ball, former law enforcement, Mac McCutcheon, former law enforcement. These guys that are law enforcement guys standing up there really made me sick, I got to tell you.
Well, the whole thing chafed me. I mean, again, what do we stand, and I can't speak for everybody because not everybody's a Republican, but as a Republican, what do we stand for as Republicans? Supposedly law and order, cleaning out corruption, being honest, being the good guy. When the Attorney General, the Republican Attorney General, points his finger at you and says, you're a crook and I'm going to try you in front of a jury of your peers to prove it, how do you
It's
back
all
that guy?
political.
It is. Well, the problem is that the speaker and the former government, they think they're absolutely above the law
Yeah.
and order. It does not apply to them.
If you read the indictments, they are just, it's incredible.
It's amazing.
We're going to have to hold it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with more on Mike Hubbard's indictments. Stay put.
The V is sponsored by MediaWorks Communications, quality video production and marketing services. The Locker Room, fine men's clothing.
I make sure to get your kids to school and home safe every day. I am AEA.
I make sure your child receives a healthy meal each day. I am AEA.
Thank you, AEA, for protecting our public schools and our futures. We are AEA.
It's time to take a road trip. In Alabama, the road and the restaurants are calling. We've elevated barbecue to an art form, a meat masterpiece. Fine dining your thing? National awards are putting us on the map. Because everything's fresh and local. And if you like your dinner with a view, well, you can't beat this. Alabama has a road trip with your name on it. Which one you gonna take?
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. This year was another big sweep for the Republican Party. No one benefited more than Robert Bentley, and his coattails were very long. The question, Jack, before the politicos is, will Robert Bentley use that political capital in his last 4 years?
I'll be very disappointed if he doesn't, because I think these first 4 years, he kind of stood on the sidelines and kind of let the legislative process work and kind of gave in to Mike Hubbard and Del Marsh. I hope Bentley is more assertive these next 4 years. He has the power of the people behind him.
He does.
I think he's a good, honest, decent guy. I think he's going to have to make some very bold decisions here to get us out of financial straits that we're in. So I hope he will flex a muscle and run the show and not let the guys over at the State House dictate the agenda.
Well, I agree with you. I concur with you. And I think one very strong signal is when he hired former Speaker Seth Hammett to come in as the Chief of Staff. That was a very strong signal because he's got the backbone and the strength and has worked in that process for many a year. Very level-headed, very smart, knows how to get things done. And Bentley's a great, honest man. And I think that's a great attribute to have Seth Hammett with
The
him.
governor really does have power if he'll exercise
That's
it, right,
correct.
Barron?
He's got to know how to use it, and that's why bringing in Seth Hammett was a great idea. Seth knows how to use the power. One of the things that these guys need to realize is every Republican who won a race by 20 points or less owes their election to Robert Bentley.
That's right.
He made that spread so wide by being so overwhelmingly popular, suppressing the vote in some of the more strong Democratic districts, bringing Republicans to the poll who maybe don't ordinarily vote. He put $5 or $6 million in television, radio advertising, driving out the vote in an otherwise dull and boring year. So if you won by 12 points, 8 points, 15 points, Robert Bentley is who you need to go kiss the ring of.
That's right, as opposed to somebody else.
Absolutely.
But he said that he wants to be known as Alabama's greatest governor, not from an ego standpoint, but because, and these are basically his words, because he cares and loves the people of Alabama so much. But he cannot go down in history as the greatest governor if he doesn't stand up to the legislature. I mean, it's not possible, is it, Claire?
Well, it's not, and he's got to do that, and I think he's capable of doing that. And once again, Seth will help him, and I think he's got a good team around him. And I look forward to seeing what he does because they've got a lot of challenging issues ahead of them.
Well, he may not have to worry about Mike Hubbard because his trial, we think, will come up. Right now, it's scheduled for March the 3rd, I think, and that's right before session begins, and that trial should take about a month at least. It'll be
At a very minimum a month.
It's a complicated case. I thought we'd take a minute and go through some of the players. Now, none of these people have been indicted for anything, but they could have been, it appears, or maybe.
Some of them could have been.
Some of them could have been. But we know, we've been told that they are material witnesses. That's what Van Davis said.
Well, and they've all lawyered up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, this is, I started calling this the Matt Hart Van Davis Full Employment for Attorneys Act. That's what we, that is the law.
It's hard to find a
under.
criminal lawyer in the state of Alabama right now, you can rest assured.
Yeah, you don't want to get in trouble. But Bob Riley is the biggest fish that's named there. We get Robert Abrams. He's from out of state. But two...
he's the guy that owned the company in Opelika or Auburn.
Auburn, yeah.
Right.
But I don't think we have to say, what about Riley? Let's go back to Riley. I mean, Riley's basically accused of helping Mike with his business, right, Barron?
Yeah, I mean, you're not allowed to offer things of value to public officials, period, end of story. You're not allowed to request things of lobbyists if you're a public official, period, end of story. They bragged that these were the toughest ethics laws ever passed in the entire history of the world, or whatever they said, and they patted themselves on the back, rah, rah, sis, boom, bah. Well, you got to live under your tough ethics rules, and if you make it impossible to even ask a favor of a lobbyist, then you got to live under that law.
Riley's got one of the most expensive big lawyers in the state. I'm sorry.
No,
Claire.
I was just going to say, but they left this big wide open gap calling it economic development. And if it's economic development related, it doesn't apply.
Well,
so that's what they're trying to do.
You were talking about Robert Abrams. He owns the plastic cup company, and now he owns the plastic medical device thing. RSA gave him $78 million in loans.
That's a little scandalous to me.
I think so too. I think somebody's arm was twisted on that deal. It's, that's my opinion, not fact, but that's a hefty sum.
Well, we know Bob Riley, it looks like Bob Riley's PAC got $100,000, and we know that
from this guy
personally, and we know that Hubbard he was on the payroll. I mean, he was a consultant.
Right. Well, and anyone who questions the validity of these, you have to stop back and think, what is a grand jury's task? Who is a grand jury? What are they? They're 18 citizens from Lee County, his fellow peers. They may know him personally. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But they may have run into him at the grocery store. They certainly saw his commercials during that. And in the midst of all that cheerleading for what a great guy Mike Hubbard is, they looked at the evidence and came to the conclusion that there was at least enough to indict.
Absolutely.
And so, and as you look at the names of some of these people, it is shocking. You look at the former governor. You look at a billionaire out-of-state investor.
Yeah.
In Robert Abrams. You look at Holbrook.
Will
Brook.
Brook.
I mean, these are big names. These are big deals.
Yeah, right. And you got Holbrook, Will Brooks, Robert Barton, Jimmy Raines, and Billy Canary all giving him $150,000 for a business.
Would they have given him $150,000 to a business that was at one time bankrupt if Mike Hubbard was not Speaker of the House? That's my question.
That's a fair question.
I think that's the conclusion we have.
Their ties to Auburn and BCA and leadership there. I mean,
Will Brook went to Alabama. I don't think he has any.
No. He was
chairman.
he was chairman of the BCA board during that time.
Yeah,
that's why I say that.
Well, I think it's all extremely interesting. I want to change the subject real quick. We got about a minute left. Dale Jackson, radio personality or whatever you want to call him from Huntsville, released an off-the-record tape he had with prosecutor Matt Hart about the Hubbard indictments. Barron, what's your take on this guy?
I don't care if you're a journalist, an analyst, a commentator, whatever you want to call yourself. When somebody calls you and says off the record, even if you feel like you have to record the call to protect yourself, that's fine. Put it in a shelf and forget about it.
Respect that friendship.
Absolutely. Not even friendship, just respect the off-the-record mantra. He said, well, this is going to become public anyway. That's BS. It was not going to become public anyway. He's the one that forced this out. He put it on his blog. He put it on Twitter like 75 times. He wanted this story out because it furthered the narrative he was trying to push that favors Mike Hubbard, that this is somehow a concoction, a political concoction.
He's fallen into that herd so badly.
Why is Dale Jackson so in Mike Hubbard's corner?
Why is he still in?
Well, I want to know how he's still employed. I mean, he says, I'm a commentator, so I don't have to play by the rules. You would never find Rush Limbaugh releasing an off-the-record tape.
You wouldn't find Barron Coleman and Jack Campbell, who have our own radio show, doing that. I mean, if somebody says to us off the record, that is truly
It's as if you never spoke to that person.
Yeah, I mean, of course, then you go Matt Murphy and Leland Whaley. Well, they're part of the whole family, the Hubbard Riley family.
The crazy thing is, I listened to the whole 52-minute tape, and Matt Hart sounds great. He sounds reasonable. He lets people know that, just good information that doesn't break any rules.
Well, I think this hurts them in the end because Matt is credible and he sounded credible.
And it's not above me to believe that Matt figured he would release the call.
Well, he is a smart guy. Yeah. But we're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch us every day at alreporter.com and every Sunday on ABC throughout the state. Thank you for watching and have a great Sunday.